Jeff, where has the time gone?
I know exactly where it's gone. It's gone into 332 pages of my latest book.
You know, that's been a massive effort on your part, and I think it's the best thing you've ever written.
Really?
Yeah, seriously. Oh, the book you did on the Canon PowerShot G10 was a masterpiece. But this one I'm going to reach to many, many times, I know.
Yeah, well, you know, we both spend a lot of time with Adobe Lightroom, and then when it's released soon, my Adobe Lightroom course and compendium should help.
That's right. Lightroom is a big, fat program. It's constantly evolving. I know I'm not the only one who could use some guidance navigating the catacombs of panels and modules in that program.
So, wait, I just spent the past year plus writing this thing, and now you want to talk about it?
I want to photocombobulate it, Jeff. On this episode, Jeff, you're the expert and I'm the fumbling novice. So I want to toss questions at you about Lightroom and have you answer them. Game?
Why not? Let's go.
All right. So let's start from 30,000 feet. What is Lightroom? Or should I say, what are Lightroom?
Oh, what are all the Lightrooms? Yeah, this used to be a really easy question to answer. And in fact, without getting too much into like the history of how the book was produced, when you approach, well, wait, you said at 30,000 feet. When you approach a project like this, initially it was going to be like all the Lightrooms. And it soon became apparent that there's just no way we could do that. So Lightroom, there are 4 components to Lightroom. And I think because of Adobe and their masterful way of screwing up their naming, it's still confusing for a lot of people. So there's Lightroom Classic. So Lightroom Classic is the original Lightroom. It is more desktop focused, and it's basically what most Lightroom using photographers have used for a long time.
Yep.
And then Apple came out with Lightroom. And part of the confusion here is that Lightroom Classic was called Lightroom, and then they called it Lightroom CC because it tied into Creative Cloud or something.
Right.
And then they made this new app, but instead of trying to differentiate it, they renamed that Lightroom CC and then turned Lightroom CC into Lightroom Classic. And to this day, and this was, I mean, honestly, this was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
To this day, people get confused.
I'm still confused. It's been years and I'm still confused.
So what differentiates this is that Lightroom, just plain old Lightroom or Lightroom Desktop, it's kind of easier to say it's kind of easier to say Lightroom Desktop. It is Lightroom built from the ground up, just rebuilt. And part of that is because Lightroom Classic, it's an old program. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a lot of legacy code. And, you know, people who've used it for a long time, like it was slow, it was sluggish. And so what the new Lightroom is, it's basically faster, leaner. It doesn't have a whole lot of the extra features that, you know, a lot of people don't use in Lightroom Classic. But the key to it is that it is cloud focused. So whenever you import something into Lightroom Desktop, sorry, Lightroom CC Desktop,
non-Lightroom Classic, just to be
not
clear.
Lightroom Classic,
not Lightroom Classic.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. When you import something into there, it will automatically get uploaded to your Creative Cloud account, like your storage there. And the cool thing about that is then you can sync it to all your devices. You can sync it to the other part of this, which is Lightroom Mobile. And the Lightroom for mobile apps, they run on Android phones, iPhones, and iPads.
Mm-hmm.
And that lets you have access to your photos on your portable device, and you can edit it. And all the edits sync nice and clean So like for example, what a great thing to do is I have my iPad, and after I do a photo shoot, I can import them into my computer. They go up to the cloud. They come back down to my iPad with copies, and I can review those there. I can make some edits and know that when I get back to Lightroom on my computer, that just like those edits are just there. I'm not redoing any work.
Right. And it's brilliant if you're traveling, right? And you don't want to bring your laptop. You know, I really love Lightroom Mobile on my iPad.
Mm-hmm.
You can use the pencil. It's really elegant. But I don't use the Lightroom desktop, and I'm using air quotes here. I don't use the Lightroom desktop because I use Lightroom Classic, but they synchronize still. It's just a little jinky, right?
It's janky. We can definitely get into that because that's sort of like this little side alley.
Yeah.
But before we do that, I just want to mention the other part of it. There's also a Lightroom for web, and it's kind of the like the plumbing that is out there that facilitates a lot of this, but has a web interface. So you can actually go to lightroom.adobe.com, sign into your Adobe ID, and have your images there and do, I would say, most of the editing that you could do on your desktop. So
That blows my mind. So you could be like in an internet cafe in Bogota,
yes,
and work on your photos, even if you just had your phone with you.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. And that way you can just, like have access to your library. Let's say you don't have any devices with you, and a client says, "Hey, we need this shot," or we need like an emergency edit of this shot. Do you have like another version of this that we could use? As long as you have an internet connection, you can actually get that, and you don't even have to like download it and resend it to them. You can just provide them a link and they can download it. So
that's really so cool.
It's actually really cool. It's sort of unheralded, but for our purposes, because we're typically using Lightroom Classic or Lightroom Mobile, it just doesn't come up a lot, but it's there. So that's good to know.
Well, let's go up to 60,000 feet then and talk about.
I can't breathe.
I know it's hard up there. If somebody's, I can't believe that this would even happen, but let's pretend there's somebody out there that listens to this podcast that's never used Lightroom. Mm-hmm. What the hell is it? Why would you want to use Lightroom?
That's a very good question. So basically, Lightroom is two things. One, it is a photo editor. So it has lots and lots of professional tools for turning the photo you shot into an edited version, and lots and lots and lots and lots of different possibilities there. Mm-hmm. But it is also a library manager. And so rather than having to keep track of everything on your computer with folders and opening files manually, basically like the Photoshop model, mm-hmm. where you're in Photoshop, you want to edit something, you go file open and you get to that file and you open it, you save it, and maybe you save it with a revision. You end up with, image 1234 dash edit dash final dash really final dash
seriously now this is the last
seriously
one.
Done
yep.
dot png right? Like all of that. And so what Lightroom does is it keeps track of where all your images are. So like just as a real, again, like let's say 45,000 feet level, you do some sort of a photo shoot and you come back, you import your images. You've already set it up so that Lightroom will put those in a specific place. Usually it's like your pictures folder. Sure. The way I have it set up is it makes new folders for every day. And so, all the photos I shot on Saturday go into that date. All those photos I shot on Sunday go into the next date. And I don't have to touch those files at all because Lightroom keeps track of where they are. And then what it will also do is it keeps track of anything you do to those files. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, Lightroom is also like a big database. Yeah. So if I take one of those files and I add some keywords to it so that I can find it later. And then I, make some exposure adjustments and boost the clarity and crop it. The file on disk doesn't change at all. So it's a true non-destructive editor, and then Lightroom, the app, in its database knows, okay, for file 1234.img or image 1234, it needs to be cropped to this dimension at these specific points. Exposure needs to be +1, and these keywords need to be added. So it's handling all of that for you, which is one thing that I really like, because I hate having to manage things all over my
Sure.
my desktop and stuff.
Well, it keeps your storage down, right? So what I always try to, when I was trying to explain this to students, I always say it's you're writing a recipe card. You're not actually making the cake.
Right.
When you're working on that photo in Lightroom, it's because it's non-destructive. You're simply compiling a list of instructions, and then when you create the JPEG or you send it off to a printer or something like that, that's when you're actually baking that cake. And so
I should have stolen that for my book.
next version.
Next version. Okay.
So Lightroom, in my mind, Lightroom has always been two programs in one. It's one of the things I love about it, is it's my management program, but it's also where I can work on my photos. Now, it used to be I would start working on my photos in Lightroom, and then I would go somewhere else to finish the job, because Lightroom was sort of thin on features that in that respect. Nowadays, I hardly ever leave Lightroom to work on things. And I want to get back to that later, but before we get there, I want to stay on the first part of the answer, because the asset management part of Lightroom, I think, is its killer feature, because I have 280,000 images in my library, in my Lightroom catalog. And we should probably identify what catalog and library are. Those are two separate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about me. Let's talk about me, Jeff.
Let's talk about you.
I have all these photos. I've been taking photos for a long time, and I have tons of them on my hard drives. And Lightroom knows where everything is, luckily. And I want to be organized. I really like to be organized, but 280,000 images is a lot to juggle. And I'm not great at writing keywords when I import. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I don't. I don't always remember to search by keyword. It's just not intuitive to me. But I am a big fan of making collections. I'm a big fan of keeping things organized by date. So digging into the Lightroom capabilities on the organization, on the asset management side, how is it? What's our best practices now for keeping organized in Lightroom?
Yeah. Okay.
That's a big one. I know that's a big one.
It is a big one. And I will shamelessly promote. I wrote a book called Take Control of Your Digital Photos that talks about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent of keywords, but I also recognize that, well, let's just say it, nobody uses them. Okay. So, in fact, one of my editors at Rocky Nook, I don't think he has applied a keyword in his life, and he's a great photographer, and he, deals with photography and photo books all the time. And I mentioned this to him once. He's like, I don't even bother.
Yeah.
But I think it's because he takes that other approach, which is, putting things into different collections, which is another word for albums. So, pardon the giant brain dump that's required to sort through this, but
go for it.
Yeah. So Lightroom Classic has collections. Lightroom and Lightroom Mobile have albums. And honestly, collections is the better term, because we're not making physical albums. Like the metaphor just doesn't really work anymore, except that's what everybody calls albums now, right?
Yes.
So that's just,
it's a comfortable term for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's a comfortable nomenclature. And so there are some people who, will do a project like for example, I imagine that when you went to a recent event where you shot a bunch of motorcycles.
Yep.
So I'm guessing, without seeing your Lightroom library, you probably like have a folder for that event, like motorcycle day or whatever, so that you know exactly. And you know, and maybe that's in like a sub album or subfolder of you know, action photography, and then inside of that is motorcycle day. And so
Right.
what's great about all of this is that it can accommodate those different styles. So if you want to do collections and things, that's great. And what's nice about collections is that they're virtual. So when you move all those images into that motorcycle day collection, you're not actually moving them on disk. They can be
Right.
anywhere on disk, and so that's super easy, super convenient.
Yeah, at most we're making just a couple kilobytes, right, of data as we make a collection, right? We're not duplicating things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all sort of wrapped up in the Lightroom catalog, so you don't even have to even think about what's going on under the hood.
Yeah.
So there's that approach. So there's also the keywording approach, which I like because not necessarily because I get super deep into keywords, although Lightroom has an amazingly deep ability to create keywords. Like, you can define a keyword, and there's a dialogue in there that will let you define related words that are tied to that keyword. And you can have like multiple nests of keywords, and like,
So I got to stop you for a second.
Yeah.
That's in Lightroom desktop.
Classic.
No, that's in Classic? That's not in Classic. That's in Classic?
Yeah.
So there's a bit of an AI sensei, right? We're going to use that word, which is
sort of
maybe old school. I don't
no. So okay. So it's important to remember that Lightroom Classic has accreted over a long period of time, and I think the keywording capabilities came from that.
Okay.
I don't know anybody aside from, say, professional photographers who need to have those keywords to deliver files, like event photographers.
Stock photographers would live and die by that, right?
Yes, stock photographers, like you're shooting a red carpet event, and you need to have tags and keywords for this event because it's going to go on the newswire. Newswire, is that what they're still called? I don't know.
Out on the wire. That's going back to my days. Yes, it would be going out onto the web now, Jeff.
Onto
the World Wide Web.
The internets.
Yes.
That's right. I forget about the internets. Anyway,
a bunch of tubes.
When you need something that has like a really quick turnaround like that sort of structure helps. But for most people, you absolutely do not need that granular level of detail, but it's there. And I know that, like, for some people, that's the itch that needs to be scratched. Like, they need that sort of organization. I mean, we've talked about this in the past, like how you approach something. Some people, like, they shoot photos because they love the editing process and they love to, get into like all the different things you can do. Well, same on the metadata side. Some people, like, it soothes their inner soul to have a multiple nested keyword hierarchy.
So I want you're going to go back to what you were talking about then, right? About how it can
eventually
populate.
I'll go back.
Okay, good.
Okay. So basically, my approach, like my personal approach is, I like having keywords, and I like to have them just like at maybe a general level. One of the things I love about Lightroom Classic is that when you're importing photos into Classic, you have this fairly complicated import window that there's the option to assign keywords during import. And what I like about that is, for your motorcycle day, that's going to be the subject apparently.
Yeah.
Our example, like you could just do, Portland motorcycles, Sony event, I don't know,
That's
sports,
pretty much what
whatever.
I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that at least, gives you like some metadata structure, and all that just gets automatically added. And if you want to, you could then break that down to, like tag everything that's a Yamaha motorcycle or a BMW motorcycle, like
Yeah.
if you had a need for that. Um, but what's good is that sometime down the road, you're going to be like, I remember that I made a really cool motorcycle shot. And so you could type in motorcycle, or I remember that it was this Sony event. So Sony
Mhm.
event, comma, motorcycle. And that frees you up a whole bunch of time just sort of scrolling, trying to remember, like, was that in 2023? Was that in
Right.
2019? Was it in the summer? All that.
Because by default, your Lightroom catalog is a sequential list of photos that
Yeah.
started when you started importing photos and ends with your latest import. And so it is chronology, and that
Mhm.
chronology in my case is unwieldy, 280,000 images.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you're advocating for is that we use keywords to be able to filter the massive catalog into things that we would want to find on a quick search.
Yes.
So a great
Yes.
example would be when I imported my photos, I knew the name of the event, I knew where it was, so I put those keywords in,
Mhm.
and I think I did put motorcycle, right?
Okay.
What I didn't put in the keywords was the names of the writers or the group of writers that I
Mhm.
photographed. I have since found out those names, and so I could go back and amend those onto those photos, which would be smart, right? It'd be smart for me to put their Instagram handles and all of that stuff on
Yeah.
those photos, so I would know in for future reference who those people are. Let's say somebody reaches out and says, "Hey, we want to use that photo in a magazine article, and we really liked it. We saw it on Instagram. We really liked it. You need to go get permission from that person, to use the photo." That would be great to have that data and not have to
Yes.
spend 2 hours trying to figure that out. So
Definitely.
I really
Yeah.
like that idea. Where I'd go with keywords usually is I'll usually remember to throw a few on when I'm importing, and it just
Yep.
slathers that whole pile of photos with the same keywords.
Yes.
And then I forget about the keywords, and I use the collections to be organized.
Totally great.
But where I want to go in the future is something we talked about with Mark Heaps a little bit in our last
Mhm.
episode.
Mhm.
I want to go on import where Lightroom says, "Hey, looks like you photographed some motorcycles in Portland.
Mhm.
Do you want me to keyword these photos with these keywords?" That's where I want to go. I don't want to have to make a list of keywords. I want Lightroom to identify.
Right.
Um, and they would be able to identify brands. They would be able to identify,
Mhm.
all of this stuff because you'd be using a large pool of known data, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The
Okay.
basis
So
of that. So
here
build on
here's where
that.
AI comes in, and here's also where things bifurcate a little bit.
Okay.
You can almost do exactly that in Lightroom Desktop,
Mm,
because Lightroom Desktop is connected to Adobe Sensei. So the the other advantage to having your images in the cloud, other than being able to sync them to your devices, is that Adobe is using all of its machine learning processing on those. And so, if you had put those, okay, we're going to set Classic completely to the side because you can kind of
okay.
do this in Classic. We're going to set that to the side for a second. So let's say you imported everything into Lightroom Desktop, and then all those images went up to the cloud and filled up your storage,
Yeah.
um, which is another problem. But that's also a income generator for
Yeah.
Adobe. But whatever. All right. So without you having to do anything, without your computer even needing to be on, uh, Adobe is scanning all those images and building basically information about them, so that when you go to your collection, let's say a couple of hours later or the next day or whatever, you could just type motorcycle. And even if you had added no keywords, it would see that there are motorcycles in those images. and bring up those as search results. And maybe, motorcycles, maybe you could do smoke,
Mm-hmm.
lots of smoke at an event. So like other examples, just things that the AI can identify in an object, cars, bicycles, winter scenes, snow, like all of those things that it can figure out, like this is something that is in this image, kind of gets you around the keywording problem, because
Yeah.
basically it's keywording for you, but it's not actually applying them as keywords. It's just
a visual search engine at that
grabbing
point.
that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
Which is an evolution of keywording, is exactly what it would be.
Yeah.
So you no longer have to keyword because your search engine can just find the images, and which would be wonderful, because I haven't keyworded disciplined. I haven't been disciplined about keywording
right
for years. And
Right.
so I've got, I don't know how many photos of the Oregon coast, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
And I would love to be able to say, lighthouse photos, and have them find all the lighthouse photos that I've taken over the years, which is probably thousands.
Yeah.
And
it can do that.
It could do that. It probably get to the point where it could identify the lighthouse. I know we've talked about this in the past, where it could identify birds and things like that. Pretty amazing ability. So let's open back that door to Lightroom Classic, which is what a lot of us use.
Yeah.
What would it take, do you think, to enable Sensei? Obviously, Lightroom Classic's not populating your photos up to the cloud. Is there a way to populate Lightroom Classic with Sensei?
So far, no. So because
that would make it run even slower.
Well, so there are a couple things going on. So one, you can put your images from Classic to the cloud, but rather than just doing it all automatically, you put them in collections, and you mark a collection to be synced, and that's the way to do that. And so then when it's in the cloud can identify those types of things. The problem is that, at least so far, Lightroom Classic doesn't have like a connection to that. So when you go and you do a text search, it's just going to look for text in your metadata. So keywords
that I've actually entered.
That you've
so even if a collection is synced, I'd have to go into Lightroom desktop to activate the Sensei function.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. It makes sense.
Mobile.
Or mobile, yeah.
So I mean, one practical thing that you could do, it's not really elegant, but you could upload. Well, let's say you do some culling, and out of 1,000 pictures that you took, there are 200 that you like, and you put those into a collection that's like your motorcycle day good pictures, and you sync that. Okay. So knowing that that's going to be up in the cloud, someone comes back to you later and they say, hey, you posted this thing on Instagram. We'd love to get a shot because we have this of, our stunt team.
Right.
What you could do is you could grab your iPad and you could do that Sensei search, because that's tied in also. Figure out which one it is, and then go into Lightroom Classic and get the original full resolution version of that.
Sure.
So not elegant.
Not elegant, but certainly a lot easier than thumbing through 280,000 photos, thumbnail by
exactly.
thumbnail. Right.
Exactly. So I mean, a big part of our conversation here is time, because Adobe has built Lightroom Classic to cater to people who probably aren't using any sort of cloud stuff, but also like none of the cloud stuff existed. And I think, and then this is just my speculation based on observation, I think that one of the big reasons that they kind of restarted with the Lightroom desktop is because it was not going to be easy to put that into Classic. And given the fact that We should also mention, going way back up to 60,000 feet, even though there is Lightroom and there is Lightroom Classic, Adobe has been really good and consistent about updating them both. So
Yeah.
I'm not as worried as I used to be that Classic was just going to go away and be replaced by the regular Lightroom. I'm not going to rule it out. It would make sense for them to do that, but that doesn't seem to be a priority. I think they
Well,
know their audience well enough.
I think so. And to give some context for people who haven't been, neck deep in this stuff forever, like we have, um, there was a long time where Lightroom was really suffering for speed. And
Yeah.
everybody was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can keep using Lightroom. I just can't sit and watch that beach ball spin anymore. And Adobe dug down into some black magic and figured out a way to make Lightroom Classic run faster, without losing any of the features. At the same time, they said, we're making a new version of Lightroom that is going to be really fast and really nimble. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons it's fast and nimble is it's just not as full featured. But we know that there are some people that don't need all this stuff. So we're going to offer this up, and even offer it up at a better price point for subscription and things like that. So there's some really nice advantages to not using Classic if you're not using all of the feature sets of Classic. But what I want to go back to is what you just said, which I think is really important. There was a time when they said that everybody sort of like, oh my God, I got to start transitioning from a product that I know, even though I'm frustrated with how slow it runs. It has everything in it I want. It does it. I do all my work in it. I've got all my catalog stuff, all my keywords, all the stuff I've worked on for years. Now I'm going to have to migrate to a lesser product, and Adobe said, "No, we're going to we're going to develop both of them side by side." And it's been really nice because in the latest releases of Lightroom Classic, they've added some stuff that is just, I hate to even use the term because it's used all the time, but it's game changing. It solidifies Lightroom Classic's role in a professional workflow. So
yeah.
So
and I mean, well, I was going to say, I mean, like Lightroom Classic does a lot, and for them to just, I mean, you look at Apple and Aperture. Aperture did a lot, and Apple was like, yeah, but again, I'm speculating, but it seems like they said, yes, Aperture does a lot, but the market for professional photographers and enthusiast amateurs isn't really at the level that we want it to be. So what we're going to do is we're just going to finish Aperture, and we're going to put it into this new Photos app, and Photos will be for everybody, and it is for everybody. But like a lot of stuff was lost when they just got rid of Aperture, and I think that had to have been the model for Adobe to say, we can't do that unless we just want to lose all of our customers.
Right.
And it's also, we're saying, to kind of wrap up the whole library portion of this is, not only does it have this capability, but you're talking about people who have their entire libraries here inside Lightroom. Now, from a company standpoint, a lock-in standpoint, that's great. But also from a practical standpoint, it turns out that doing photo libraries is really difficult.
Yeah.
And so there's not a good way to just say, oh, I'll just switch to Capture One, or I'll just switch to something else. There's no really good path for that. There are tools like there's a program called Avalanche that is really interesting in being able to kind of merge different libraries and work with them together. But you're just not going to get that, like, oh, I can just switch and move forward. Like, it's a big damn deal. So the one tiny thing you mentioned, libraries versus catalogs. Just a quick thing to point out is that Lightroom Classic, you can have multiple catalogs. So, like, let's say you have let's say you were shooting the motorcycle day for a client, and maybe you just want a catalog that has just those things and separate from your personal photos.
Right.
Lightroom desktop and mobile, you basically just have one library that's tied to your Adobe ID. So you can't do that.
You don't have that option. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
But with Classic, you
Just
could
had to
have
get that
multiple
off my.
catalogs.
Get that off
I'm
my
glad you said that because I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah.
Adobe has done a fine job. I won't say great. I'll save that for future things. But Adobe's done a fine job of creating a suite of products that work together pretty well, even though they do the same thing. And so I want to branch off and head off towards this direction because we just started teasing it a little bit. I know there are people out there, when I teach classes, people bring this up a lot. I don't want to pay for the Adobe subscription. I don't want to do, this. I don't want to make this commitment to going onto the Adobe ecosystem.
Yeah.
What other products out there? And I know you've tried a lot of these. You've been looking at some of these things really recently. I've tried several other products, and I keep coming back to Lightroom because I'm like, gosh, nobody else has figured this out quite like Adobe has. So what is out there that's similar to Lightroom?
Well, so the first thing that comes to mind is Capture One.
Mm-hmm.
And it in the sense that like it is doing the library, it is doing the editing, like those features. I don't think it is as full featured as Lightroom, but there's some people who just swear by it. It's great, especially for like portrait studio photographers, where you are tethered to your computer and you're just shooting directly into Capture One. You can do it in Lightroom, but from what I know of people who do this for a living, Capture One is like their preference. There's also On One Photo Pro, On One Photo Raw, I think.
Yeah, I haven't been able to keep up with that.
Here's the other thing. Like all of these are Photo Raw Pro, Light, Dark Pro, whatever. So the company On One has a similar suite that also does the library, that also does the editing, also full featured. I've written about Luminar in the past, and Luminar wanted to be Lightroom for a while. And honestly, I think they ran up against just how difficult it is to have a library. And so even though they had promised to, unseat Lightroom, what they actually delivered, they scaled way back and then basically said, you know what? Yes, you can have your library and it'll make it easier for you to edit your photos, but we're not really doing much more than just that.
Yeah, it's very basic. Very basic. Yeah.
I would not store my photos in Luminar anymore. I prefer to use Luminar if there's a feature that I need to use that as an extension or plugin from Lightroom Classic to send it out, do the edit, and have the results sent right back to Classic, which is another very cool thing about Classic. It has this architecture, so you can bring in some of those other tools. Lightroom Desktop does not.
Right. That's a good point. A lot of us use plugins. I don't use them as much as I used to, but Nick, Topaz, all of these wonderful plugins that feed your photo right back into the asset management system of Lightroom is really nice. Let's talk about, we don't need to go down that road of what other options are, because I think both of us have been willing in the past to explore other options, and we keep coming back to Lightroom. And so I hate to say it, but I've pretty much hitched my wagon to Adobe, and I'm going to happily pay that subscription because I think it's a good value. I think for what I do, it works really, really well. So let's talk about the processing side of Lightroom. Let's talk about the fun side of Lightroom, right? They've added a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of new AI features and masking and selection and all this stuff. Let's talk about what is some of your favorite new stuff in the processing side of Lightroom.
So I think It is not hyperbole for me to say that the masking features that they've introduced uh, over the last year and a half have changed the way I use Lightroom and the
Hmm.
way I edit photos. And it's not like I never used masks in the past. It's just that now the AI based ones are really good at picking out different specific sections. So, like for example, you could always make a linear gradient. And for example, you want your sky to be a little bit more dramatic. The
Hmm.
clouds are there, but they're kind of soft, and so you do a linear gradient, you'd increase your exposure and decrease your exposure, increase the contrast, you get more interesting clouds. Like that stuff's all there now. But what it can do now is very, very accurately, like make a mask over a selection. So if you have a person there standing in front of the clouds, and even if they have, like windy hair or something, you click a button and it selects the subject and it does all the hair and everything. And if you've ever spent any time trying to do that manually or sending it off to Photoshop and using its tools to try to,
Hmm.
get the edges, it will blow your freaking mind the first
Yeah.
time because I mean, it's not 100% all the time, but it is very close most of the time.
And it's
And
fast. It's
it's
so
fast.
fast. Yeah.
It's really fast. Yeah, like it just does
Can't
it.
believe
So
I'm saying that about Lightroom Classic, but it's fast,
it's
right?
fast. Yeah, and this feature is in all the different variations of it, and
Hmm.
the masks transfer between devices. But what that does is it allows you to to what's a good way of saying this? It allows you to do things that you could do before or maybe you didn't do because they were just too complicated. So for example, like I have an example in my book. I did a portrait session with my sister and her family, and it's
Hmm.
my sister and my niece, and they're sitting on a log in a park, and there's cloudy uh, sky behind them, but there's also like a little hill in the background, and it's on the water. So you could absolutely do that linear gradient to darken the background, but maybe you don't want to darken the hill behind them, and you don't necessarily need to do anything to the water behind them. And if
Hmm.
you drag that down because they're in the frame, like they're also getting dark.
Right.
So one thing you could do is you make that gradient, everybody gets dark, but then you create a mask that just says select subject, and it grabs both of those people and and then you can either like change the exposure on them or you can basically like have masks that work together. So what I have in that case is I want to subtract the subject from that mask.
Hmm.
So what I would have to do in the past is go in with a brush and paint them out, and that's never very accurate.
Hmm.
Now it just knows, all right, here these are two people, they are probably the subject, and we're just not going to apply these adjustments to them. And that's it.
That's
And
it.
also, I should point out that I'm not dealing with layers. Like
Right.
this isn't Photoshop where you have to think about blend modes. One of the
Hmm.
great things about Lightroom compared to Photoshop is that Lightroom was always the no layer version of editing because layers can get really complicated. And I think for a lot of people, like just the concept of layers can be difficult until you've wrapped your head around them. And
Well, and
so
and the results weren't
Lightroom,
always gratifying, right? It
exactly.
was they
Yeah,
weren't intuitive. Yeah.
exactly. There were a lot more steps to do something.
Hmm.
So here with the different masks, like technically they're kind of sort of layers, but what you're doing is you're masking an area and you're applying separate adjustments that don't just apply to the entire image. And so you can, make the people in your image a little bit brighter to make them stand out.
Hmm.
Or, and this is what kind of blew my mind in the last major release, because this is AI, because it understands that those are people, it understands parts of people.
Yeah.
So you can say, I want select the skin, like the facial skin and the body skin of the subjects. It'll make a mask for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, you could like just adjust the exposure for that, or, maybe the color balance is off,
Color balance. Yeah.
like that's kind of a huge thing. Or just the eyes. Like, I just want the eyes to pop a little bit more. I want a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of exposure and a little bit more contrast, because with portraits, that's what you want. Like, you're
Yep.
drawn to the eyes. So you can, make those masks, and literally all you're doing is you're saying, I want to click this person, select this person, and I want to select their eyes, and that's it. Like you're not painting on them at all.
Yeah.
And it's like, A, it gives you a lot of creative flexibility. B, it's super fast,
Mm-hmm.
because all you had to do was like make a couple of clicks, and then you can do whatever you want with it. And because it's non-destructive, you can make their eyes red if you want.
Yeah.
uh you know and you're not affecting any of the pixels, so you have lots of variation. Another example that I have in the book is you can add light that wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I wrote about this in my photo AI newsletter. Maybe we'll put a link in the show
Yeah.
notes, that showed how to do this. Where basically had like a portrait of a person, and one side of their face was just darker than I would have liked, because I only had one light and we were
Mm-hmm.
outside, and I just wanted to like bring up some illumination there. If I had been like in a more studio setting, maybe I would have a reflector or another
Sure.
light to fill that in.
In a perfect world,
Well,
right?
in a perfect world, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I was able to do in Lightroom is sort of create a light, which was just a radial gradient, nice and warm and soft. Put that next to him, and so that lit up that side of his face. Just the edge of the gradient just hitting right there. But then, of course, you're lighting up the area behind him. So then I was able to intersect, like take like select him as the subject, and then do an intersect, which basically said like just use the part where these two masks overlap. And so that got rid of the light in the background and only lit that side of his face. And so it looks like I had another light there.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, that is something that would have been difficult to do, because if I had just like increased the exposure of the shadows, it affects everything. You don't
Everything.
want that. Or you're going in there with a brush. And there are lots of talented people who will go into Photoshop with a Wacom tablet, and like they're really talented at that. I'm not an artist in that way, and usually I just want like a little pop of highlight or something.
Well, and it
And
makes
that's something that I could do without leaving Lightroom.
yeah, and it makes the creative process. One of our intents when we use a program like Lightroom is we have a visual, a mind's eye idea of what we want that photo to look like, and good software just helps you realize that quickly and without suffering. And I want to go back and confirm what you were just saying, because I do think this is the biggest thing Lightroom's done in years and years and years, possibly ever. In the past, we would approach a photograph in Lightroom as a global edit and then as local edits. And so global edits affecting every pixel in the shot. Local edits would be brushwork or maybe a gradient tool or radial gradient, like you're talking about, some sort of targeted adjustment to a certain part of the image. The part that wasn't working in Lightroom for the longest time was really precise masks, where we are saying, I don't want the hair that's over the sky to get darker when we darken the sky. And it was really hard to brush those hairs in Lightroom, right? You have to get down to the small 1 pixel size brush and be really precise, and you could fuddle around with it, but it was really frustrating. Now, instead of starting with a global adjustment sequence that I normally would back in the day, I'm starting right now with AI masking. I'm like, I want the subject, and I'm going to treat the subject differently than the background, and I'm going to treat each subject differently. So, what we haven't said, which is worth mentioning, is not only will Lightroom identify the subject, it'll identify all of the people in the photo and give them each their own identity in the masking
Yes.
panel. So you can say
Yeah.
person 1, person 2, person 3, click on that, and then within that person, face, hair, clothing, all or whole body. And that is incredible. To combine that with the ability to modify those masks with luminosity ranges, color ranges, all of this stuff. I no longer see a need for going to Photoshop unless I'm doing some crazy like object removal, and even that Lightroom does a pretty good job with anymore. So
Yeah,
it's
it does an
crazy.
okay job.
Yeah.
The actually like the healing the object removal, even though they did add a content remove eraser tool, it's okay.
It's not
It's
what
not great.
Photoshop can do. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on what you're removing. But I want to follow up on one more thing, which I think you were going to ask me about anyway. But this is a good time.
Go for it.
Not only are you able to make all these masks, but you can create adaptive presets that use these masks. Now, forever, I've always been, that sort of floating high above presets because I don't want my photos to look like somebody else's photos. And,
well, it was, let's be frank, presets for a lot of people out there was a business for them. Like, you want my looks, buy my presets. And it was always like, you're basically selling me a cookbook. When I could learn how to cook on my own and then come up with my own recipes that are better. And I always saw presets as an obstruction to learning. And so now, though, what you're going to tell me is presets now have expanded functionality that is mind-blowing, and I'm just starting to explore them, and it's crazy. It's really wild.
So here's the thing, and you can have they call them adaptive presets because you can include one of these AI masks in your preset. And what that means is, let's again take the example of like you're doing a portrait session, and your preset may have things like you want the overall saturation to be reduced. You want like maybe like a subtle color profile or a LUT added, like those sort of like quote unquote looks. But you also want to make sure, because this is a portrait session, you want to make the people look flattering. So you want to add a little sparkle to their eyes. You want to maybe apply a small amount of skin smoothing, or you want to make sure that maybe the shadows in their clothing are not too dark, and so you're seeing the detail in their clothing.
Or you blew the whole lighting setup for that shoot, and your lights are too yellow, right? Your lights are too yellow, and so you want to add a color correction to the whole, just the person, right? Because your key light was too warm, that sort of thing.
So there are some adaptive presets that are included that are just like enhance eyes, and so you don't even have to go in and go to the masking panel, choose a person, choose the eye masks, create that, do your adjustment. You just tap this adaptive preset, and it does that. If you have multiple people, it will just select all of the eyes and make this adjustment, which you can then edit later if you think it's too much or too little. But literally with one click, you have made this adjustment. And it's like another example is their adaptive presets, one that makes basically like smooth hair, and another one that's like sort of more contrasty hair. So, in some shots, you have a model that has like, really, long hair, like you want that detail and you can enhance that detail. You click once, boom, it's done. So those are the ones that are built in. But then you can build, like as you were just saying, you can build your own presets. So if you get done with a photo shoot and you edit one of those shots and you realize that you had to do, like you applied a vignette and you did the eye sparkle and the skin smoothing and all that. And actually, I also want to mention the skin smoothing. All Lightroom is doing is taking the texture slider and reducing it. And so you actually still get the texture of the skin.
Right. It doesn't look like a porcelain doll. Right.
It doesn't look like porcelain. Yeah, it doesn't look airbrushed. And
right.
I really like the way they've implemented this. So you do that on one of your shots. Well, the problem is, unless you are shooting a statue, like people move within the frame.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, if you wanted to create masks, you would have that, and then like in the next shot, they're to the left by a couple of inches, and so you would see where the mask is. Because these are adaptive, because they are AI, the application looks at all those images. And so it can say, all right, well, I know that I need to enhance the eyes. And so it finds where the eyes are in all those images. And it needs to, apply some skin smoothing. It's just going to do it wherever the person appears in the image.
Right.
And you just apply that preset to all those images, and you have literally saved yourself hours of time.
It's incredible.
Blows me away.
Yeah, it's incredible. And for people not doing portraiture, right? So we've been talking a lot about the AI in regards to identifying people. Landscapes, subject and background identification. The app uses, focal information, right? So it's saying what items are in focus, what items are soft, and it's identifying possibly through some really cool AI stuff. It could be identifying skies and all of these things. It makes selecting components of a landscape photo that much easier for adjustment. Whereas before, I would have spent in Lightroom a bunch of time with the lineal gradient mask, maybe some luminosity adjustments to that. Then I would do some radial things kind of here and there to throw a little light around. Now it's so much smarter, and it looks a lot less clunky in the final result. It looks more natural, which is amazing to consider that something so automated and so easy could end up looking more natural than something you spent hours working on.
Right. Well, and like what you just mentioned, the luminosity masking. Like one super cool thing is, again, like by taking masks and combining them in different ways. Like one example that I'm thinking of, I had a shot of a mountain reflected in a lake, and there was some in the foreground, sort of like some dark rocks, but with some dried grasses kind of poking up through the rocks.
Sure.
So I wanted to increase the exposure on those grasses because they were in the foreground, they were in shadow, but I liked them as an element. And so, like there are a bunch of different ways you could use a brush and brush over it, but it's just not going to work.
It's not going to look good.
So one thing that you could do is use like a luminosity mask, or in this case, I created a color mask.
Right.
Just looked at that color. And so I did that, and I increased the exposure, I increased the saturation. But of course, this was in the fall, so there's lots of things in the rest of the image that were also that color. But I could, again, use that intersect mask with a brush, so that then all I had to do was just roughly brush that area, and the only bits that were affected are the ones that match that color mask, which were just the grasses.
That's so cool. Because it would be really hard, even in Photoshop 3 years ago, to get in there and mask properly to make that grass look natural in a mask.
Yeah.
And now it's, we don't even have to leave Lightroom. It's quick, it's simple, and it looks so good. It's incredible. So, we could, you've spent over a year now working on this book, and you could spend days talking about all these features. We do want to plug your book a little bit, but before we get there, I want to pick your brain, because I think there's some hidden stuff in Lightroom that I find really satisfying. I really enjoy these things, but nobody talks about them. You don't see YouTube videos about these particular features. So when we're in Lightroom Classic, they're up at the top in the interface, up in the upper right-hand corner, there's this row of modules. So you have library and develop, right, which are the two we've been talking about. But then there's a few more, and a lot of times those are even hidden. You can even turn those off. I want you to tell me about some of these hidden modules that you talk about in your book, because they are some of the funnest things I find in Lightroom.
Well, so I talked about the map one quite a bit, and that sort of pushes us back into the metadata and the library, because so much of our photography is location based. You want to know which photos you shot in the Sierra Nevada or in Paris, and some of that you can add manually. The thing that I like to do, well, and actually Lightroom Classic, if you have like a dedicated tracking device, and that can just be your watch or an app that will generate the right kind of file, you can turn that on and go walking around and do your entire photo shoot on a hike or whatever, and take that data and match that with the time codes of the pictures you shot, and it'll add all of that data. I honestly never remember to do that.
Yeah.
And so what I do instead is that whenever I'm at some location, I will also take a picture using my phone, because the phone automatically captures that location data, where my regular camera does not.
Right.
So then when I bring it all into Lightroom, Lightroom Mobile I have set to automatically grab my iPhone pictures too. So everything comes into the library. And so when I get to that location, I can just see, okay, here's the iPhone one, and that has location information. And I can just sync that data to all the rest of the shots in that area, and suddenly they're all tagged with the location. And then go ahead.
So let's. Well, I want to. I can visualize this, but I want to kind of paint a picture of what the interface is like. It's a world map.
Yeah.
And all your photos are in a film strip along the bottom, and you can grab any number of photos and assign them a geographic location on the map. And you can zoom way in. You could say, I was standing on this rock at the edge of this lake when I took these 85 photos. Because most of our mirrorless cameras and SLRs do not have GPS modules in them. This is the best way to do this. But I want to add to this, Jeff, what you're saying. I like putting my stuff on the map, but the really nice thing for me is I use the map as an organizational feature, because I'm like, hey, how many photos have I taken in that part of California? And so I can zoom in on the map, and it will show these little dots all over the map that my photos are located at. So carry on. Sorry. Well, I get excited about the map.
That's exactly the reason to do it, because oftentimes maybe you're going to go back to a location. Then you can see, all right, this spot over here, I did a whole lot of photos at. So maybe I want to avoid that spot, and I want to look for a different spot. So you can sort of help plan your shoot that way. One of the things that I love and honestly didn't really realize was there is that you can create saved locations. And what that means is basically you're saying, I want to name a geographic location. It's sort of, actually, it's like an album, basically.
Really? Okay. This is new.
So it's actually not new. It's been there forever.
I know they haven't done anything to this module forever. But
this is the thing with Classic also. Like there's so much stuff in there that you're going to run into something. You're like, wow, when did they add this? And if you actually go look it up, it turns out it's been there for 10 years or whatever. But basically, like, let's say I want to create, I want to see all the photos that I shot in Tuscany. So not just Italy overall. And I could totally go to the map and I could find Italy and, drill down and zoom and whatever. But I just want to see the photos that I shot in the Tuscany area.
I see. Yep.
And so what you do is you basically center that spot on the map. and then you create a saved location, and it just has like a circle around it, and you increase or decrease the circle to represent the area that you want, and any photos that are inside that circle are now part of this saved location. So you could just say,
Wow.
all right, like which photos did I take in Tuscany? In the library module, I could type in Tuscany if I was smart enough to put that in,
Hmm.
or maybe um, like trying to remember like one of the little towns, like maybe Siena, but that doesn't catch everything. But I
Hmm.
want everything in this geographical area.
It's brilliant.
Switch to the map module, see that I've already set this up, click that, and there are all my pictures.
And from there, you could make them into a collection that
And
goes
then you
back
make them into
into
a
your
collection.
library module.
Yep.
And it's just another tool for keeping organized. But because it's so visual, it's a visual feast, right? It's a map, and I love
Yes.
maps.
Yeah.
It's a great. I love that tool, and
Yeah.
people just never talk about it. It's just one of those
Nope.
features that people are like, "There's a map in there." Flickr has a similar
Mhm.
feature,
Mhm.
and oftentimes when I'm scouting locations, I'll go into Flickr and go into the Explore map module, and it will show just like in Lightroom these little dots, and it's a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah.
But I digress. So, what was another module that you?
Digress? Us? What?
No, never.
So, another thing that I talk about in the book is the print module.
Mm,
And for a couple of different reasons. One, because, we should be printing our photos. It's just, a good thing to do. And actually, there are a lot of options for creating, um, you know, printer sheets I'm already forgetting the
like a
terminology.
contact sheet.
Contact sheet, thank you.
Yep.
Um, and honestly, like I could have written even more about the print module, um, but there were practicalities of time and page count
Sure.
that prevented me from
Sure.
doing it. But also, it's worth pointing out that in Lightroom Desktop, you cannot print. There's no way to actually print an image from
That's
Lightroom
that's right. I
Desktop.
actually got into trouble with that. I was teaching a class, and I'm like, somebody said, "How do you print from that?" Oh, you go to the share button and you click on it, and it'll have a print. And I'm like, "There's no print thing.
Nope. Yeah,
You have to
yeah, yeah,
export as a JPEG and then print it from somewhere else."
yeah,
Basically,
yeah.
which is
Which is it's weird, but okay. And so the book talks a bit about how to do that, but honestly, the thing that I got out of it. So here's the thing about writing computer books. I've said this in the past. If you want to learn a subject, write a book about it,
yeah.
because this forced me to go beyond just like my general surface level knowledge of color profiles and color spaces to
Mhm.
really be able to explain this. And so there's a section on the fact that Lightroom Classic, when you are working in I have to make sure I say this right, when you're working in the develop module, it's using Adobe RGB as the color profile. When you're
Okay.
working in like the library module, it's using SR or sorry,
Really?
Adobe RGB in most places, and I think Pro Photo RGB in a couple of other specific places. And
Really? Wow. I just
yeah,
assumed it used the same
and
profile all around. That's wild.
one would assume.
Yeah, that's
but
wild.
but when you get to printing, this becomes very important, because if you have printed from Lightroom Classic, you output to your Epson color printer, and suddenly you're like, this is really dark, or the colors are different, or what's
Mhm.
wrong? Why isn't my screen showing the same thing? And like suddenly you are in that color management morass. So what I like about Lightroom Classic is it has robust print features that let you do things like create, a print proof, and that shows up as basically a duplicate that you can adjust just for printing. So you're not
Mm.
affecting your image in your library.
Oh, okay.
It's basically making a virtual copy, but that
Right.
way, I if you want something to look good coming out of the printer, maybe it needs to be, brightened, or the shadows need to be brightened, whatever. This happens to me a lot because,
Yeah.
you know, you have a screen that's pushing light at you, but on the paper it's reflected light. So
yeah, everything looks different on paper.
yeah,
It's amazing.
So you don't want to go and re-edit your image that looks great everywhere else just for this one thing. So it has a lot of power. Now, there are also other modules, and I will say up front, there are like the book and the slideshow and the web module. And I decided not to cover those in the book, again because of time and page count, but also because I mean, like the web module. The idea is you can build a website out of it, and maybe I'm being too presumptuous, but nobody does that. If you're going to have a website, you're going to use Squarespace, you're going to use WordPress, you're going to do something like that. Like that's just kind of not a thing. And then the slideshow, super powerful. It can make amazing slideshows, but that we're starting to funnel down into the needs of which photographer.
It's a very niche module, right?
Yeah.
I've used the slideshow module to make time-lapse videos. There's certain ways to set up the slideshow module to export a video, but that's the
cool.
only time I would ever think to even recognize that it was there. So and that's such a niche thing. That's its own book, right? So let's talk about the book a little bit.
Okay.
It's the Rocky Nook Lightroom Course and Compendium, which is a series of books, right? That Rocky Nook has for a lot of these big kind of cornerstone programs that Adobe has out. So what's the breadth of this book? I mean, it's huge. It's 332 pages. So what are people going to learn when they read it?
Okay, so the title, the Course and Compendium, what that refers to is it's kind of two books in one. I sound like a salesman. It's two books in one.
Two books in one. Two for the price of one.
Exactly. So the idea is you want to learn Lightroom, but as we've amply showed during the time we've been talking, there's just a lot there.
So much.
You want somebody to, walk you through how to do this. And so the first section of the book is the course, and it is it's a course. You download the files that I provide, and you take those files and you go step by step to learn the basics of importing photos, doing real basic metadata management, cropping, color adjustments, light adjustments, black and white conversion.
Sure.
And then exporting it as something that you could then, send to somebody else or put on social media or whatever. And so, it's step by step. You do exactly what it says so that you get a good overview of how to use all the different parts without necessarily getting stuck in the weeds of, using the HSL color panel in the develop module, which is,
it's
extensive.
Fun. Yeah.
So that's the course. And then the compendium is basically the reference section. So when you're going through the course and you do some color adjustments and you say, oh, wow, this HSL tool seems really cool. Like I just want to adjust the greens in my image. So then you flip back to the compendium and the section that talks about color and how to use those tools, that goes into a bit more detail and has like other examples and
awesome
stuff like that. Yeah.
Wow. So someone like me who's been using Lightroom forever is going to probably lean on the compendium part a lot for reference.
Probably, yeah.
Oh, this panel always confused me. Let me go, learn about it.
Yeah.
Whereas someone who's maybe transitioning to Lightroom or starting to use it more seriously, what I'm envisioning is someone who's used a lot of plugins in the past, and they're like, "Wow, I didn't know Lightroom had all these features.
Yeah,
I've just used it to organize my photos. Now I want to learn how to use all these AI masking things like that."
Yeah.
They're going to lean on that course side, and you're going to walk them through it panel by panel and get them, up to speed on all those features. That's amazing.
Well, and also I think there's my gut says that there's a considerable number of people out there who are good with Lightroom, but they've not really experimented with any of the new stuff. So, you've been, doing basic adjustments, exposure, color, all that, like great. But there's a whole lot of talk about AI and the new masking panel and the new AI-based denoise feature. And, you know, do you want to go and like sit through a bunch of YouTube videos? Maybe not.
Probably
But
not. Yeah.
you take this book, even if you're experienced, but you're just not sort of up to speed on what it can do now, you can just run through the course really quick and then, get a good overview and then dig back into the rest of it.
That's so cool. Yeah, Lightroom is so big. It is one of the few programs that I use that I would actually want to have a book on my desk. And I'm so glad you wrote this because there are a lot of Lightroom books out there, and they tend to take a selective approach. Like, I'm going to show you how to, and much of them are dated because they've changed the program so much over the last year.
Yeah.
To have a reference manual that is up to date and complete is hard to find. So nice work putting in that year of effort. I know you've worked really hard. We've talked about this for months, right?
I know. Well, and let me do another plug too. Because it's a Rocky Nook book, and for some people this is really important. For me, it's really important. You will be able to get a hardcover, nicely printed, high quality version where the colors in the book have been, like we put a lot of work to make sure the colors match up. And not to sound like a jerk, but I have some books from other publishers that they skimped on the printing, and so you have this photo book where the photo quality and the image quality and the print quality is just not so great. And Rocky Nook, like they do whatever the extra thing is that's needed to make a really nice book.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to like having that in my hand and being able to flip through it. Because I'm going to totally toot my own horn here. Some of the pictures that I chose, like they're all my pictures except for there's one from you. One from you, and then there was one that I got from stock for various reasons. But anyway, like they're all my photos, and there's some really nice.
They're going to look awesome. They're going to.
I liked a lot of those photos.
Yeah, and they're not tiny in there, right? So I've gone through the book. The Rocky Nook does such a good job of respecting the design of the books. It's not just screenshot text. The layout, the full page of photos, inspiration stuff in there too. It's a beautiful book just to sit and look at. But you can also get an e-version to have on your iPad. So if you're, don't want to lug this big 332 page book around to the coffee shop, you can have it on your iPad as well, or on your computer. So how do we get this book? I mean, I know it's not done yet. It's literally in process. So.
Yeah. So as we record this, it went to the printer early this week. Because we are dealing with print books, there's going to be a lag. So the print book is currently scheduled to arrive in September, which sounds kind of crazy, but I think that's
if the ship doesn't get stuck in the canal again, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of that time, like I've been on site when a book has been printed, which is a super cool experience, by the way. And it doesn't take them that long to actually print the book, and I don't know how many they're printing, but if thousands of copies. What takes the long time is to box them up, put them on a boat, because it's being printed, I think, in China, and then the boat has to make its way, and then it goes to the distributors and all of that. So that's just the lag. Although I complain that it's not going to come out till September, and then I have people who are publishing fiction books who are like, "Yep, my book's all done. It's all ready to go. It'll be available in 2024."
Yep.
So like that's just the business. However, the ebook that you mentioned will be available mid-June.
Okay.
So and again, a plug for Rocky Nook. They create a PDF, but they also create like Kindle versions and EPUB versions. And they have a separate team who actually makes those ebooks so that they aren't just, sort of spit into the format. Like it should be a high quality reading experience, even without the actual layout.
Right.
And the best way to get it, and the best way to get it is to order it from Rocky Nook. And because you can get a bundle that includes the print and the ebook, so you can get the ebook, and then when the print version comes out, it'll show up, or you could just get the ebook version. And I can probably say this: I have sort of my long-standing code. If you use the code Carlson40 at checkout, you get 40% off.
That's a crazy good deal.
That's crazy good deal. So definitely use that.
So, and can people order the book yet? So if they go to Rocky Nook today, what are they going to see? They're going to see coming soon, right?
Coming soon. Yeah. So I believe what they do is, as soon as the ebook is available, that's when they let you order it.
Okay.
And I think that's just to, satisfy the, you want to order something, you want to get it right away.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to wait.
Yeah.
Forget you ever ordered it. So.
There might be a way to be notified when this is available. I'd have to go check.
Okay.
So
check our show notes. We'll have it in the show notes, and we'll have a link to the Rocky Nook site, so you don't have to type in Rocky Nook, because that's a lot of work. Kidding. So you have some other books also on Rocky Nook and other places that we'll put some links to as well. We mentioned the digital asset management book that you wrote a few years ago for Take Control.
Uh-huh.
You're a prolific writer, right? So this is a big one, though. I want to pat you on the back. This is a big book.
Thank you.
And I know how much you've put into it. Yeah. And it's one I'm really excited about, because I even though I've used Lightroom for a long, long time, there's certain panels and things where I'm like, I really wish I understood this at a more molecular level, because then I could use it better. I don't think I'm very efficient sometimes with Lightroom. So I'm looking forward to spending more time with the book. I've already looked through it quite a bit, and it's great. I also will say this, that Lightroom has become a program that I don't dread sitting down and using. So I couldn't always say that. It used to be, I'd be like, oh man, I got to go work in Lightroom. And now I find myself in Lightroom when I have some time on my hands, and I'm like, let's go play with some images and see what I can do. And having your book, especially with that compendium side, is going to be really nice, because I can kind of kick the tires on some of the more obscure features that I don't use day to day. So I'm really looking forward to that.
And if I can plug another feature of the book, there's also a chapter. It's not super long, but just on improving performance, because there are things that you can do if you are using Lightroom Classic, for example, on like an older, slower computer. My recommendation is, get something new and modern, because it will absolutely pay dividends in Lightroom. Lightroom is much better about taking advantage of the CPU. They're adding more features that are tying into the GPU, so graphics acceleration, and that really helps. But there are things that you can do, like I detail when you might want to use smart previews in your library, for example, to speed up some things. And when you import things, you can choose what types of previews you want, and you can make that choice. Well, as I'm editing, I want the least amount of friction. So I'm going to generate 1:1 previews that'll take longer for my import to happen. I'll go get a cup of coffee, but while I'm editing, I'm just focused on that, and I'm not being slowed down by the program. So there are things like that. There are, trade-offs that you can do that are sort of scattered throughout the settings and the program that, a lot of people just don't bother with, because it's too much. And so I explain how to do a lot was
Yeah, because watching that beach ball, it's
the beach ball is the worst.
Yeah, it's the worst. It's the worst.
Yeah.
So, well, that was awesome. I can't wait to get that paper book. I've been reading the e-version and enjoying it. So, Look for that soon, folks. The ebook will be available in June, printed book coming in September. Look at our show notes for a link to the site. And when it goes live in June, you'll be able to order the ebook and start working right away. As with all of our episodes, you can find all kinds of information at photocombobulate.com. Each show has its own show notes page where you can get some more background information and links. And there's other episodes that we've talked about Lightroom in. So go back and check out our conversation with Julianne Cost. That's one that I really enjoyed. When we were talking, we spent a lot of time talking about Lightroom. So if you're just digging into Lightroom, that's another great resource. So find that at photocombobulate.com. Anything else, Jeff?
I kind of feel like we've covered everything and at the same time only scratched the surface. So
sort of how it always is.
I would say, if people have other questions, if there's something that we didn't talk about, send us a note, either, comment on the site or send an email to Mason or I. And, we'll do our best to either answer directly or maybe, collect some questions for a future episode.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's so much you can do. And we didn't even get into some of the little tips and tricks. You touched on the fact that you can actually hide the module names that you're not using, which I've used this program for years. I had no idea you could do that. You could change, the nameplate that shows it. Like there's all sorts of things like that. I mean, gosh, maybe we even do an episode on just crazy,
just hidden hacks,
secret hidden things in apps. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so get in touch. Let us know if there's anything else that we can help you with, because it's all here.
Yeah, you've accumulated all this knowledge. We got to plumb it now. So thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see you next time. Just so you know, since you reached this so far into the episode, we're publishing these as we get them done. We're both pretty busy, so we are not on any kind of set schedule with our episodes. So they come out when we get them done, and we want them to be good. So we're not just here blowing air at you. All right. Go get some rest, Jeff. You've earned a break.
I think some coffee and some sleep will be great.
Sounds good, buddy. See you later.
Sorry. Bye, buddy.